Welcome to How to Build an Archetype, the series where I defend my stances on my weird questionable playstyle. Today, we are running it back to the streak of archetypes awakened from party members. This time, we are building Knight. The same rules apply to this video. We strive to build an archetype to make them stronger with skill inheritance and synthesis skills, while preserving their overall theming. There's a lot to talk about in this video, as Knight really had a lot going for them, so I'd like to just jump into it. But first, I actually have a sponsor for this video. This video is sponsored by First 4 Figures. If you're like me, you'd love anime and games, and as a huge anime and game connoisseur, maybe watching or playing isn't really enough. That's where hobbies like figures comes in. But have you noticed recently that the prices of figures have been skyrocketing? And when you get around to buying one of them, you realize that they are so big and you don't have the space for them. If only there is a figure adjacent hobby that requires less space with an affordable price. Introducing FiGGYZ. FiGGYZ is a new product lineup by First 4 Figures. It features a new style of collectible figures that delivers on being affordable, doesn't require much space, and is highly customizable. It has a compact body, but feels premium with a sturdy weight. It doesn't feel flimsy. One of the main things that I like about FiGGYZ is the art style that they created for these figures. It's kinda like a pixel art, but it's not as pixelated as some pixel arts out there. It kinda creates a new art style from that concept, and I like that. With the reversible metal background and the mag mount system, it gives these artful pieces a cool 3D look. With a 3M wall mount magnet included, FiGGYZ is a figure that can be placed anywhere you like. Place it on your desk, you got it. Stick it on your fridge, you got it. Stick it on your wall, you got it. FiGGYZ is also a highly modular figure, with a super rare chance of a hidden chase background included in your FiGGYZ. You'll get a chance to get either gold, silver, or bronze backgrounds for your FiGGYZ, somewhat like a prestige collection. It's a very low chance to get them, but because it is modular, you can trade for them with other FiGGYZ collectors. In fact, FiGGYZ also has a huge collector app to help you with your collections. There's a QR code in the back of each FiGGYZ that you can scan to register and track your growing collections. You can use them to see which series you have missing, see their edition, and their serial number for ease of collection. Here's a quick look on one of the FiGGYZ that I got. Here is metaphorrefantazio's Knight, Hulkenberg. She has her iconic red hair, which is shown quite pronounced with the dark clothing colors. She also wields her trusty halberd on her back, and with her serious eyes, it makes a cool character figure in this art style. Hulkenberg also comes with a background of Royal Capital Grand Trad. It is slightly to the left because it is meant to be displayed with other party members as well. But if you don't like that or only plan to have one, you can switch the background to the backside, the same background image that I usually use for my thumbnails. Unfortunately, I didn't get a rare chase background for Hulkenberg, I got it for other characters, but overall, this FiGGYZ looks amazing. But if metaphorrefantazio isn't really to your liking, FiGGYZ also made other franchise lineups as well. Lineups include character figures from Yu-Gi-Oh!, Freeran, Metal Gear Solid, Sonic, Street Fighter 2, Banjo-Kazooie, Cowboy Bebop, and a lot other notable franchises including Persona 5. So, if FiGGYZ looks interesting to you, check them out at FiGGYZ.com and use my coupon code Izanagi at checkout, or use the link in the description down below to get a 5% discount on orders above $50. Again, use coupon code Izanagi at FiGGYZ.com or use the link in the description below to get a 5% discount on orders above $50. Thank you again to First 4 Figures for sponsoring this video. The Knight is an interesting archetype. This is the only archetype whose design kinda misled people on what this archetype specializes in. Or at least, it misled me. When you first look at Knight's design on the Hulkenberg Awakening cutscene, the main proponent of it is that it is on a horse. If you're like me, you'd probably thought that Knight would be the agility/movement based archetype. This is a main characteristic for the Fire Emblem games, for example. Those who are on a horse have very high movement. But no, the Knight in metaphorrefantazio is not the agility based archetype. That role goes to Thief, which comes later on in the game. The Knight is the tank of the game. Using the Fire Emblem comparison again, The knight from metaphorrefantazio is more so the armored knight than the cavalier. It's really just the horse being the red herring here. Knight boasts a high endurance stat spread with fairly balanced other stats. With that much endurance, the natural resistance to slash, and the skills that boost a lot more defensive capabilities, Knight is the tank of the party, and is very effective at drawing attacks to the knight and keeping your party alive. That's kinda about it, really. If healing with a healer isn't enough to make your team stay alive, or if there are complications of your party being one-shotted by the enemy, Knight is the perfect archetype to slot in to direct the enemy's attacks to the knight, so that other party members that are focused on offense do not die easily. However, it comes clear from Knight's skill set that Knight does not have a lot of offensive options in turn for the high amount of defensive options. Generally speaking, damaging skills will definitely be more damaging than melee will ever do. So, not having any offensive options for dealing damage or exploiting weaknesses will definitely be one of Knight's weaknesses. Sure, Knight have shield arts, that is a strike physical damage. Combined with Knight's melee, Knight have two affinities to exploit. Physical affinity isn't really an affinity that a lot of enemies will be weak to. There are some, but it's not so frequent. And shield arts is more of a utility skill to me to debuff the enemy's hit/evasion rate. So as a purely offensive capability, it's not as good as other archetypes. Furthermore, keep in mind that Knight also had an electric weakness. This means that Knight isn't entirely immune to whatever SMT shenanigans that the enemies have up their sleeves. I don't really remember a lot of enemies that had electric though, at least not as much as fire, but it's still something to be considered. So, what skills should we inherit to Knight to either solve Knight's problem or expand their strengths? Honestly, my first suggestion is kind of a stretch, but since there are no strict magic rule for Knight, my first suggestion would be either of these 5 magic skills: Bot, Blizz, or Kande from Mage, Psych from Seeker, or Hama from Healer. These are the first 5 magic skills that you will get fairly early in the game. Further down the line, Mudo is also obtainable from Thief, but if you've maxed out Thief already, Mudon is better because it's straight up the higher damage version of Mudo. All of these skills serves to exploit weaknesses as a means of offense. The other skill that I will suggest inheriting to Knight is Medi from Healer to expand on Knight's defensive capabilities. I haven't mentioned this before, but Knight had a healing skill called First Aid. While it is a very useful skill for recovering health, it's only usable while out of combat. So in the situation that you are running out of health in battle, Medi is a great skill for that situation. The next set of skills that I would recommend is a weird one, but let me explain a bit. Knight in its theming is an archetype that deals pierce damage with their polearm. However, due to the design of its skill set, Knight does not have any pierce skills in turn for more defense. What I'm about to recommend is why not inherit some pierce skills, which is a great idea that it fits the theme while making it stronger. However, early on, pierce damage skills are very hard to get. It is not until Gunner is unlocked and you'll get pierce skills. That only works in the back row. This is actually fine, because being in the back row increases the overall defense the Knight has, which is mostly where you actually want your Knight in. It may sound stupid or weird, but Knight is more effective at their job to be in the back row. So adding pierce skills that are locked to the back row is actually not a bad idea. So for these pierce skills are Sleep Shot, Poison Shot, or Hack Shot from Gunner. These are all situational, but more preference, because Hack Shot has the largest damage out of the 3, but the additional status ailments are usually based on which one you'd like to inflict on enemies. Just like the other archetypes, Knight also has their pool of synthesis skills. However, Knight's synthesis skills are actually pretty stacked, and they are such amazing skills to have. These skills are Jump Thrust, Protect Guard, Magic Guard, and Hammer of Justice. Following the theme of Knight being the protector, let's start with the defensive synthesis skills first. Protect Guard is a simple barrier that blocks any incoming physical damage for one ally. Practically, this is very useful when you're in a huge pickle, or when you know that the enemy will do a physical attack on an ally. Keep in mind that blocking attacks would also eat up double the turn icons that it usually needs to attack. So in this case, if the enemy only has 2 turn icons, you can outright skip the enemy's turns with this synthesis skill. So to get Protect Guard, pair your knight with either another knight, a healer, or a commander. Magic Guard pretty much affects the opposite affinities of Protect Guard. Magic Guard's barrier will block elemental attacks, but also it's for all allies in the same row. Honestly, just because it affects everyone else in the same row, this is much more applicable in battle than Protect Guard. This will also block Knight's innate electric weakness, so this is arguably more effective as a defensive tool. Honestly, these two are that similar, so I don't really know what to add. So to get Magic Guard, pair your Knight with either a Seeker, a Mage, or a Healer. The rest of the synthesis skills are offensive skills, which are great additions, especially when Knight notoriously doesn't have a lot of offensive options. Starting with Jump Thrust. I can bet that most, if not all of the players who played this game will cast this skill the first time the whole synthesis skill system is introduced. This is everyone's first synthesis skill, and for a good reason. It lowers an enemy's defense, its damage is decent as well, but this is mainly for the defense debuff. Defense debuff is very valuable in basically all games really. The faster you can kill an enemy, the better your performance is. It's as simple as that. To get Jump Thrust, pair your Knight with either a Warrior, a Brawler, or a Berserker. And for the last skill, it's Hammer of Justice. Contrary to the name of the synthesis skill, this is a pierce damage skill instead of a strike damage skill. Well, we will learn later that the hammer naming convention is for the other effect, but it's still kind of funny that it is pierce damage. So this other effect is that it implants a weakness to pierce as well. I've said many times before that implanting weaknesses is probably one of the best effects that you can have, especially in a game like metaphorrefantazio, where exploiting weaknesses can essentially give you an extra turn, which can compound up to double your turn duration. Using only this synthesis skill is also a viable strategy as well, because it's a pierce damage skill that implants pierce weakness, which can be repeated multiple times until the enemy is dead. So, a very powerful skill to have. And it's a really great skill to make difficult encounters a breeze. So to get Hammer of Justice, pair your Knight with either a Brawler, a Merchant, or a Summoner. To get all of the synthesis skills listed, a quick combination would be a Knight, a Healer, and a Brawler composition. If you have 4 party members already, you can mix the combination to, for example, a Knight, a Warrior, a Brawler, and a Healer, or a Knight, a Brawler, a Commander, and a Mage. Whatever works as long as you get the synthesis skills that you wanted to have. Alright, the next on the list is Knight's Adept Archetype, the Magic Knight. Now, let's just jump straight to a complication here. Because when you first learn of the name Magic Knight or the requirement of unlocking that archetype, you will think that this Adept Archetype focuses more on the magic side of things. No, it isn't. The Magic Knight doesn't have any offensive magic skills. Oh. Alright, I'm not gonna focus on the technicalities of the name here, because when you look at it, this is just Knight, but performs a little better at both defense and offense. It still retains Knight's Proclamation, which is a staple for Knight, that pairs well with Rakukaja and Tetrakarn for extra defense. Magic Knight can heal in battle now, with Mediline that rivals a lot of other healing skills in effectiveness. Heavy Rush is a great damaging skill to not fall off in the damage department. And let's add Dark Dodge in here, just for the sake of it. All in all, a solid archetype to use for the same role as Knight previously, which, then again, has the same weakness as before. Offensive capability is better with Heavy Rush, but overall is still pretty bad. and the affinity coverage is arguably worse now since it's only pierce damage. While you definitely can cover that up with Wizard's upgraded elemental skills like I have mentioned before in the Knight section, the section of this archetype skill inheritance will focus more on expanding Magic Knight's existing skill and making them better, because I don't want to make this video repetitive by just putting in the 3 elemental skills from Mage for all situations. So, the first skill that I would suggest to inherit to Magic Knight is pretty obvious by now, but it is definitely Shelter Formation from General. I feel like the amount of times I've mentioned Shelter Formation and Formation of Figure in my videos are way too many at this point. It's starting to get on my nerves even mentioning them. But I do not exaggerate to say that Shelter Formation and Formation of Figure are the 2 most valuable and powerful skills in the game. Specifically for today, I am taking Shelter Formation for Magic Knight, just because of the theme of Magic Knight keeping your party alive by bolstering their defenses, and its overall worth to take a slot for it. It synergizes well with Mediline too, because it prompts you to have all your party members into one unified row, so Mediline's healing would affect everyone on your party. The next skill that I would suggest inheriting is Makarakarn from Faker. Magic Knight has Tetrakarn, which makes a barrier that reflects incoming physical affinities attacks one time. Well, why not inherit the elemental version of it? It's a good option because there are a lot more elemental affinities than physical affinities as well. So having more options for defense is great. I guess I should also mention that reflecting attacks will also deplete all turn icons. So when enemies' attacks do get reflected, it also essentially skips their turn. The next skill option to be inherited would be offensive skills, but instead of expanding Magic Knight's offensive capabilities by covering more affinities to exploit, I'm leaning towards Pierce that gives more effect than just damaging. In this case, we should get for defense debuff. Power Thrust from Pugilist and Smashing Salvo from Sniper are these skills that I'm talking about. While these two have different damage description, they have a similar damage scaling in practicality, since Smashing Salvo gets instantly debuffed in damage by only being castable while in the back row. So they really are the same skills, kind of. Difference being that Smashing Salvo makes you inherently more defensive by being in the back row, while Power Thrust is a lot riskier by having an HP cost to cast it, but is versatile since you can cast it in whatever row you are in. The main takeaway of these skills are for the defense debuff, which is always a great tool to have. And the last skill that I will suggest for Magic Knight is Electric Dodge from Assassin. This is mainly to cover up the electric weakness that Magic Knight had, so that they won't get exploited easily with electric element attacks. It's still a chance-based skill, but it's still useful to avoid unforeseen accidents. For the Magic Knight's synthesis skills, unfortunately, some synthesis skills I will not recommend and skip their pairing for the reason that I will explain later when I talk about those synthesis skills. But first, let's talk about some of the useful ones first, starting with the ones that are direct inherit from Knight, Magic Guard, and Hammer of Justice. I've mentioned Makarakarn to be inherited to Magic Knight, but that shouldn't make Magic Guard obsolete, because Magic Guard can still affect all allies in contrast to Makarakarn's target to one ally. It is still a strong defensive synthesis skill to have ready. To get Magic Guard, pair your Magic Knight with either a Seeker, a Mage, or a Healer. Hammer of Justice is still the same as before, and is still useful because of its Pierce Implant effect. Plus, with the amount of Pierce damage skill that we inherited, Hammer of Justice is increasingly more valuable to get for that sweet Pierce weakness implant. To get Hammer of Justice, pair a Magic Knight with either a Brawler, a Merchant, or a Summoner. Now, let's talk about the newer synthesis skills. Following the weakness implant effect from Hammer of Justice, Magic Knight's Hammer is a new synthesis skill for Magic Knight that does have weakness implant effect, but on electric affinity. Makes me wonder why the Knight's main element code is electric, yet they are weak to electric themselves. Anyway, Even though we don't have any electric damage skills in Magic Knight, the weakness implant is still useful because you can loop the synthesis skill to hit the electric weakness with this synthesis skill. The damage scaling for this is also pretty high. With extreme in the naming, it's going to be a huge damage increase for Magic Knight. Definitely a worthy synthesis skill to get. To get Magic Knight's hammer, pair your Magic Knight with either a gunner, a mass dancer, or a berserker. And then we have Leap Thrust, which is essentially the upgraded version of Jump Thrust. Just like previously with Knight, Leap Thrust is a great skill to have for the purpose of both dealing damage and defense debuff on the enemy, which in turn will ramp up your damage against that debuff enemy. However, for this particular situation, you'd probably realize that it's essentially the same as the skills that we inherited to Magic Knight, namely Power Thrust and Smashing Salvo. When we think about it, this is essentially more damage than the skills that we inherited. From Power Thrust and Smashing Salvo, the one skill that have the highest damage is Smashing Salvo with heavy damage, which is the same description as Leap Thrust. However, Smashing Salvo also requires you to be in the back row, which inherently weakens any physical damage that you will do in turn for higher defense. So the fact that Leap Thrust can be casted while in the front row is already evident enough to make this worth above the inherited skills. This is not saying that the inherited skills are bad, so you shouldn't inherit it in the first place. No, because keep in mind that synthesis skills require at least 2 turn icons for a collaboration skill tactic. What I'm trying to say here is that there are multiple cases that you want either one or the other. Like for example, Smashing Salvo if you only have 1 turn icon left, or Power Thrust if you don't have any MP left, and Leap Thrust to deal more damage and when you have the resources for it. So more options is great, and Leap Thrust is a great consideration for that philosophy. So to get Leap Thrust, pair your Magic Knight with either a warrior, a brawler, or a berserker. Now, the rest of the synthesis skills are the useless ones that I want to mention a little bit, starting with the first one, Marakukaja. Well, this is a party-wide defense buff by 1 rank, which is fine in its concept, but after you get Shelter Formation, Marakukaja becomes completely obsolete, as Shelter Formation is essentially double the effectiveness with 2 ranks of defense buffs, and that only requires 1 turn icon in contrast of Marakukaja's 2 turn icon cost. So Marakukaja will be skipped. The other one that is virtually useless is Protect Guard. Okay, this skill has proven to be a great synthesis skill with the Knight. So why is this bad in Magic Knight? Well, the reason is basically the same as Marakukaja's case, but even worse for Protect Guard. Because Tetrakarn exists, a basic skill that does a better effect than a synthesis skill makes the synthesis skill obsolete. And Tetrakarn isn't even an inherited skill. Magic Knight learns Tetrakarn by itself. Granted that you need rank 20 to learn it, but it's still a weird thing to have Protect Guard be the same Protect Guard, but not like an all allies version of it or anything. So yeah, those 2 synthesis skills are going to be skipped as they are not worth getting. So, to get all of the listed synthesis skills, except for the ones that are skipped, the archetypes that can activate 2 synthesis skills are Brawler and Berserker. However, since you probably won't have Berserker at this point of the game, the most plausible party combination would be a Magic Knight, a Brawler, a Gunner, and a Healer, with Healer allowed to be changed to either Seeker or Mage. Alright, we now arrive at the elite archetype of Knight. Although, unlike any other archetype lineages, Knight has 2 different elite archetypes that still have the main core theme of a Knight, but different approach in playstyles with their skills. It is like what Mage has, 2 different elite archetypes with different skills, but same core theming of a Mage. However, the 2 Knight elite archetypes are arguably a lot different to one another than Mage's elite archetype, with the first one that you would have unlocked first, the Paladin. Paladin is one of the 2 Knights elite archetype. With only rank 20 on Magic Knight required to unlock this archetype, Paladin is a more defense-focused archetype, with additional protective and healing skills to keep your party and the Paladin alive. Receiving a guard function on drawing aggro to further reduce damage taken, 3 stacks of defense buff on a single skill, a synthesis skill as a normal skill, 2 healing skills, and passives that include chances to reflect as one of them. Paladin's job is only to keep your party alive. That can be a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing about this is that Paladin just didn't have any offensive capabilities, both physical and elemental skills. All the Paladin can do to attack is either one of the synthesis skills or melee. So yeah, I feel like because of how solid Paladin's defense is, some of Paladin's skills inheritance will most likely be some offensive capabilities. So right off the bat, the first skill to be inherited would be Health Thrust from Martial Artist or Smashing Salvo from Sniper. The reasoning is the same as previously as well. It's a pierce damage skill that decreases defense. It's still a versatile tool to have. However, I'm leaning towards Health Thrust in this choice because Smashing Salvo's overall damage would fall off quite a bit compared to the others, as it is only available to cast on the back row. For the next skill to be inherited, what other damaging skills would be appropriate to inherit to a Holy Knight other than Exorcist Light from Savior? This skill is great for expanding the affinity that you can exploit, but also that Exorcist Light has the largest damage scaling for a single target magic skill. But most importantly, a light-based element attack would definitely be appropriate for a Holy Knight to have. That's probably enough for offensive skills. The next skill that I want to promote is Medica from Cleric or Medical from Savior. Paladin's healing skills are great. A full party heal but only in the main menu, and a heal that cleanses debuffs as well. But the one thing that Paladin loses is a group heal that can be casted while in combat. If you skimped out on a healer in your team composition, no other suitable archetype is left for the healing job other than the Paladin. So Medica or Medical are great skills for further party survivability. Other than that, I know that I haven't revealed the second elite archetype of the Knight Lineage, but I had to because I can see Paladin borrowing some skills that the Dark Knight had. These skills in question are Magic Counter and Instant Recovery. Magic Counter is an expansion to Paladin's Counter, because it is reflecting the opposite side of the affinity list. Being able to have a chance to reflect a physical attack is nice in itself, but it would be way better if every coverage, including elemental affinities, are included in the mix. Instant Recovery is also a nice passive skill to have, considering how status ailments work in metaphorrefantazio. A lot of the times, status ailments can be cleared within 3 turns, but sometimes it can be way longer than that. Instant Recovery ensures that the status ailments will be cleared after the Paladin's turn is up. Considering how crippling a status ailment can be, this is a fantastic skill to have. I still have some recommendation for Paladin, but these skills are somewhat of a luxury skill and are applicable to both Paladin and Dark Knight. I will also mention these skills later in the Dark Knight skill inheritance section for clarity reasons. So these skills are Shelter Formation from General, Sturdy Stance from Samurai, Unyielding Blood and Battle Master from Martial Artist, and Unshaken Will from Dragoon. Well, Shelter Formation is the same as before. It's a very valuable skill for defense buffs for all allies. Sturdy Stance is weirdly enough a very fitting skill for the whole Knight lineage, but placed on the Warrior lineage for some reason. It straight up cuts the damage taken by half, but makes the Knight unable to dodge, which, in all honesty, unless you want to do a dodge tank gimmick, this is an awesome skill to lessen the damage you will receive. This skill is the equivalent of Firm Stance from the Persona series. Unyielding Blood is a failsafe skill that instantly heals the Knight to full if the Knight gets down. It's not going to be easy to be down to activate this skill as a Knight, but it's always nice just in case accidents happen. This is the equivalent of Enduring Soul in the Persona series. Battle Master and Unshaken Will can be explained pretty easily. They prevent certain status ailments entirely. Battlemaster prevents physical ailments, while Unshaken Will prevents mental ailments. Needless to say, these are amazing skills, but are luxury skills. You don't need them, but they are very nice to have. I felt like I've talked a lot about Paladin already, so I'd like to speed things up with Paladin's synthesis skills. Thankfully, a lot of Paladin's synthesis skills are the same or upgraded versions or variants of the same group, so let's go through these first. Hammer synthesis skills. These are Hammer of Justice, Magic Knight's Hammer, and Crusader's Hammer. Great skills for implanting weaknesses to the enemy. Hammer of Justice for Pierce Affinity, Magic Knight's Hammer for Electric, and Crusader's Hammer for Light, which can also be paired with Exorcist Light. To get Hammer of Justice, pair your Paladin with a Brawler, a Merchant, or a Summoner. To get Magic Knight's Hammer, pair your Paladin with a Gunner, a Masked Dancer, or a Berserker. And to get Crusader's Hammer, pair your Paladin with a Warrior, a Thief, or a Masked Dancer. Flying Guard Thrust. A further upgrade to Leap Thrust, a synthesis skill that deals pierce damage while dealing defense debuff on the enemy. It's good. Pair your Paladin with a Warrior, a Brawler, or a Berserker. Line Guard and Magic Guard. These two are the barrier skills that block physical or elemental affinities, respectively, to all allies within the same row. It's an upgrade to Protect Guard, so it's good. To get Line Guard, pair your Paladin with another Knight, a Healer, or Commander. And to get Magic Guard, pair your Paladin with a Seeker, a Mage, or a Healer. There's one more unique synthesis skill being Peerless Sanctity. This is a huge light physical damage skill that also decreases all enemies' attack, defense, and hit evasion rate. Very much worth it for difficult fights to have a debuffing skill. But since this is for all enemies, meaning that this is an area skill, this is reserved for those difficult fights that had multiple enemy targets in the battle. Otherwise, other debuffing skills would be better because of Peerless Sanctity's requirement of 3 turn icons and 3 party member combination to get. So to get Peerless Sanctity, pair your Paladin with either a Seeker, another Knight, or Commander for the first combination, and either another Knight, a Healer, or a Commander for the second combination. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think you can have them all ready all at once, especially when Peerless Sanctity requires 2 other party members' archetype to be in a specific combination. However, if we're excluding Peerless Sanctity out of the equation here, you can get all the other synthesis skills by having a Paladin, Brawler, Masked Dancer, and a Healer team composition. And finally, at last, we've arrived at the second and last elite archetype of the Knight lineage, the Dark Knight. So what's so different about Dark Knight that warrants a completely different elite archetype? Well, to put it simply, Dark Knight is a lot more offensive in their skill sets than Paladin. Instead of having defensive support and recovery skills, Dark Knight gets a plethora of damage skills. Pierce damage, electric damage, with amplifications to pierce damage, while still having some defensive skills in the form of passive skills. However, this unfortunately leads to Dark Knight losing a form of Knight's Proclamation, making them not as effective to defend your team. It might as well be an underwhelming elite archetype considering the additional requirement of level 10 wizard as well. When you look at it that way, yeah, Paladin is a lot better at defending your team as a whole. However, Dark Knight excels at selfish durability, if that makes sense. With skills like Flawless and Instant Recovery, Dark Knight's concept is a one-man army who is sufficient in battle by themselves. So for skill inheritance, what should we inherit to Dark Knight to strengthen their playstyle? My first suggestion will be Holy Knight's Proclamation from Paladin, because as an archetype that still is a part of the defense-based archetype, and that Dark Knight is still a durable archetype because of their skills, drawing attack to Dark Knight is a viable way to defend your whole team. This is amplified by Instant Recovery, helping Dark Knight dispel any crippling ailments on the Dark Knight. This means that drawing aggro on Dark Knight on enemies that will tend to inflict ailments is a very strong interaction as it prevents your team from getting elements, and your Dark Knight will cleanse that element instantaneously. The next skill on my suggestion would be more offensive skills. To utilize that Dark Knight is an offensive based Knight archetype. Health Thrust from Martial Artist, Smashing Salvo and Wild Salvo from Sniper are some of the notable Pierce based damage skills to utilize Dark Knight having Pierce boost, but most notably Health Thrust for pure damage and defense debuff, and Wild Salvo for a group of enemies. Other than Pierce damage skills, Mudodyne is also a decent magic skill that fits Dark Knight. Well, purely because it has dark in the name, so I thought a dark magic skill could fit the theming of Dark Knight. My next suggestion would be Counter from Paladin. Just like my suggestion with Paladin to inherit magic counter from Dark Knight, this is to complete the set of affinities that the Dark Knight can reflect back to the enemies. Being able to have a chance to reflect magic affinities is nice, but it would be better if it's for all affinities instead. Just like Paladin, the rest of the suggestion would be the same luxury skills that I have put for Paladin as well, but for clarification, I'll mention them again here. Shelter Formation from General for overall party defense, Sturdy Stance from Samurai for a massive increase to Dark Knight's defense, but not being able to dodge in return. Unyielding Blood as a failsafe whenever your Dark Knight somehow gets knocked out fast, and Battlemaster and Unshaken Will for complete immunity against status ailments. So now, what about Dark Knight's synthesis skills? Which synthesis skills should you have ready for battle with party combination? Well, luckily for me, there's not a lot to talk about unlike Paladin, because Dark Knight only has 3 synthesis skills in total, and all of them are offensive, and they're pretty powerful as well. They follow the same previous pattern as well. First, Flying Guard Thrust, same as the case with Paladin, is a pierce damage skill that also inflicts defense debuff. Considering the damage and the 2 turn icon costs, it's a very much worth it skill to have ready. Get Flying Guard Thrust by pairing your Dark Knight with either a Warrior, a Brawler, or a Berserker. Blackguard's Hammer, same as the other hammer synthesis skills, they implant a weakness to the enemy while damaging them with the same affinity damage. This time it's for Dark Element. This is partly the reason why I suggested Mudodyne, to be honest. It's just a funny thematic choice. So get Blackguard's Hammer by pairing your Dark Knight with either a Brawler, a Merchant, or a Summoner. And last but not least, a variant of a synthesis skill from Paladin, Peerless Shadow, with the same debuff effect to all enemies, but with the only difference being the damage affinity type being dark instead of light. Honestly, regardless of the damage affinity type, this synthesis skill is pretty much worth it for the debuffing effect, even with the 3 turn icon cost, because debuffs are powerful in this game. I know I haven't said this in the Peerless Sanctity section before, but the thing with Paladin and Dark Knight's synthesis skill is that one synthesis skill can combo with another within the same archetype. For this case, you can combo the Peerless Shadow with Blackguard's Hammer casted beforehand, so that you hit the weakness with Peerless Shadow, making you lose only 3 half turn icons instead of 3 whole turn icons. I don't think any other archetypes have this kind of synergy for themselves. Well, other than Warlock with Lost Wall. So this kinda makes both Paladin and Dark Knight very powerful archetype to use for synthesis skills. So get Peerless Shadow by pairing your Dark Knight with either a Warrior, a Thief, or a Masked Dancer for the first combination, and either another Knight, a Healer, or Commander for the second combination. To get all the synthesis skills listed, the easiest way to get all of them is to have a team composition of a Dark Knight, a Brawler, a Warrior, and a Healer. The important part of this combination is either Brawler or Warrior. You can change around Brawler with either a Merchant or a Summoner, or change around Warrior with a Thief or a Masked Dancer. Other team compositions may apply as well, but this is the easiest to get. And that's it for today. These are my builds for the Knight archetype. The Knight is a really big archetype lineage, with varying builds that can apply to them, even though their theme is being the sturdy tank of the team. So you have any other builds for your Knight and don't really mind sharing them, please leave a comment below. Once again, I want to thank First 4 Figures for sponsoring this video. Thank you for watching and I'll see you again soon.